So in this podcast, we're going to talk about an extremely important term, and that term is called operational definitions. Many students lose points on this because they actually just simply say to operationally define something just means to list all of the procedures in the experiment in order so it can be replicated. Yes, replication is important. It's why we actually engage in this term. It's why we operationalize something. But what we are operationalizing is always our variables, okay? Because we want to define them so that we can measure them. Define to measure. Define to measure. Please, let's take this slow because this is worth it. You can pause me at any time. We define to measure. Okay, here are two definitions. What I'd like you to do is get them down so you can actually put me on pause and we can get back and we can talk more about this. Okay, I'm hoping you wrote those down. Put me on pause, right? So look what you notice when you're looking at these two definitions. The operational definition is about a variable. The definition is about defining the variable that allows you to measure it, okay? And this is where the procedure comes in. It's about the procedure to determine the presence of a variable, okay? So let's give you a real life example from a real experiment or, at least a mock experiment. Okay, we come up with a hypothesis. A hypothesis is a prediction about the relationship between two variables. One of our variables is Ritalin, right here, and the other is classroom behavior. Okay, so we come up with a hypothesis that Ritalin will decrease negative classroom behaviors of children with ADHD. Okay, so we know what our variables are, right? They're Ritalin and they're negative classroom behaviors. Those are our two variables. So I'm going to give you an example of operationalizing our variable. We're going to just do one of them, okay? Remember, we want to measure the presence of negative classroom behavior, right? As we give kids Ritalin or give them a placebo. Okay, so right here, this is the procedure. This is how we make our variables measurable and manageable, right? So just read through that. We're defining what we mean by negative behaviors, because how would someone who's going to replicate the experiment know what you mean by when you say negative behaviors, right? So here's just a list. You could come up with a similar list, but with maybe one or two additions, right? But this is what this researcher decided to do. Obviously, we would even have to operationalize our other variable, which is Ritalin. How much Ritalin are we giving these students? Okay, so I want to make sure you understand this. Operational definitions are an essential component to the experiment, okay? And there are more slides, right, that help us understand the term, and also more examples here, right? If you were doing experiments on self-esteem, you would have to describe how you define self-esteem and how you're measuring self-esteem. Okay, so that's another one down.